ignoring your feelings is not usually a path to the happiest, most motivated, connected, successful version of yourself, because your negative feelings are um, are not a problem in and of themselves to be solved. They might feel like a problem, but they're actually your brain telling you about what it is that you need in order to be happy and motivated and connected and calm and all of that wonderful stuff. You're just taking the wrong message from it. Great to be back here with you. I'm excited to talk about the rest of the items on the mindset shifts on the cheat sheet. We have 3 more that we'll be covering today. We're going to be talking about focusing on the positive, a lot of upside there, also a lot of potential problems. We're going to be talking about practicing mindfulness and the effectiveness of that, as well as the importance of allowing yourself to experience your feelings. So let's jump right into it. Do you hear all the time, like I do? I hear all the time, like, oh, you're just supposed to focus on the positive, fake it till you make it, like just, put on a smile, stop focusing on the negative. Is that bombarding you all day too?
Yeah, I hear that all the time. That was literally my first question. It's such a common piece of advice that everyone has heard before. I feel like everyone just shrugs it off.
Yeah.
So what do you think the misconception is about the people who actually do this, who stay positive even during tough times?
Well, so it's a double-edged sword, because focusing on the positive is an extremely powerful tool, but most people use it the wrong way. There are a few different aspects to this. One, it is not simply ignoring your negative emotions. Because if you ignore your negative emotions, that doesn't make them go away. You might temporarily feel better because you're focusing on the positive, but your brain will essentially say these deeper circuits will like, oh, well, if you're not going to pay attention to these negative emotions, these frustrations, these anxieties I'm trying to tell you about, okay, then it'll just take care of it on its own, and just you won't be consciously aware of it. And that's why sometimes we're like, why do I have so much trouble staying focused or motivated, or have trouble falling asleep, or why do I feel so tired all the time, or why do I have all these headaches, or like all these random symptoms that are often, it's like, oh, because your brain was trying to tell you about these negative emotions, but you're like, oh, I need to think positive, and you thought that meant ignoring your negative emotions. The other issue is very similar. It's thinking that your positive emotions and your negative emotions have to do this like cosmic battle. And so people are in relationship or at work in their business, and they have these negative emotions about it. And they're like, well, I can't be angry at my spouse because I love them. Or like, I can't be frustrated about my business because I'm making money and I have all this privileges and these wonderful things about my life. And so it's different than ignoring it. It's actually invalidating your negative feelings. You're like, no, I'm not allowed to feel stressed or angry or frustrated because of all these wonderful things in my life. And then uh, people use the positive things in their life to like beat down and criticize themselves for feeling anything negative. And that's where a lot of people don't understand the benefits of these negative emotions. Like sadness helps you accept the things that you can't control. Anger helps you take action uh, and be more motivated to stop problems that you see. Anxiety helps you avoid danger or mistakes. But if you are always ignoring those negative emotions and trying to replace them with positive emotions, then you are missing out on profound messages your brain is trying to tell you. One of the things that's really crucial to understand about focusing on the positive or practicing gratitude or whatever it is that you want to call it is a lot of people interpret that to mean that they should practice feeling grateful or practice feeling positive emotions. And you don't really have direct and immediate control over how you feel. And so what happens a lot of times when people try and focus on the positive, they're like, oh yeah, I'm glad I have running water and electricity, but it doesn't like immediately fill them with these like warm fuzzies. And so they're like, wow, I have all these great things in my life, this wonderful job, this relationship, and it doesn't make me feel anything. I'm so ungrateful. Like they take these positive things that they're focusing on, and then looking at their lack of huge emotional reaction and using that as a reason to criticize themselves for not feeling more grateful. And the key is that in the short term, you can't always control how you feel. Like, yeah, sometimes we get lucky and your life is, really stressful at the moment, and you just take a moment and you're like, oh, well, I'm glad my family loves me. Or like, oh, I'm glad I at least have a job. And sometimes, oh, boom, that little thing is enough to make you feel better, but not always. But just because it doesn't make you feel better in the moment doesn't mean it's useless. Like sometimes when we go for a run, we feel energized right after it. Sometimes we don't. But it's still helpful in the long term to go for a run because it's going to have these long term changes. There are cool studies that I came across that illustrated this. One was showing how just thinking of positive memories, like just take a moment, think about something that happened to you. Oh, that one Christmas. Oh yeah, that fun family vacation, or like that's already in your brain. You're just not thinking about it. But the simple act of thinking about positive memories uh, increases serotonin production in a key part of your brain's emotional circuitry called the anterior cingulate cortex. You don't need to know all the details. People get that, like, oh, right, serotonin, like that's the neurotransmitter system targeted by antidepressant medications. And like just taking a moment to think about positive memories changes this key neurotransmitter system in a key brain region. This other study looked at writing thank you letters. Like just take a few minutes, write down a letter expressing your appreciation to someone for something they did for you. Maybe you feel like you never adequately thanked them, and you don't have to even send it to them. But in one study, they had people do this a few times, and they brought them back 3 months later and stuck them inside an fMRI scanner. And the attention circuit in their brain reacted more strongly to positive information than people who hadn't done these thank you letters. Because when you actually take action to express those positive emotions, to focus on the positive, it changes how your brain perceives the world. Essentially, your brain is like, oh, you want me to pay more attention to that? Okay, I'll pay more attention to that. Like it's kind of like how if you're on, Facebook or Instagram and you click on an ad, the social media algorithm is like, oh, you want me to show you more shoes? Oh, you want me to show you more vacation? Okay, I'll show you that. And that is one of the amazing powers of focusing on the positive. And that's where understanding the neuroscience is so helpful, that these things are useful to do because they often have long-term effects in reprogramming your brain and making it over time easier to look at the positive, make it more of a habit, easier to cultivate those positive emotions. But it doesn't come from trying to feel more grateful or feel more positive. It's simply about directing your attention to the parts of your life or your reality that you're glad are there. And this is where this next tool of practicing mindfulness is so powerful, because we're often stuck in the future. Think about all the things that could go wrong. People think of mindfulness as, they picture these Zen monks, or they're just, achieving enlightenment or something. It is simply the process of directing your attention intentionally to the things that are happening now, or at least something that is happening now. And therefore, you're not paying attention to the things that aren't happening now. And when you're worried about, well, what if I get sick? What if my spouse gets upset with me? What if I have a difficult client? What if I don't get any sales in my business next month? Whatever it is, as soon as you acknowledge, like, oh, this is a thought that I am having, it immediately makes you present. Because when you're stuck in that thought, you don't, you're thinking about the future, something that isn't existing, and you are feeling those emotions of this thing that isn't actually in existence right now. As soon as you're like, oh, that's a thought that I'm having, or that's an emotion that I'm feeling about that thought. Well, the fact that you are thinking that right now, well, that is something that is happening right now. And it creates an opportunity for you to then do something other than what the autopilot programmed into your brain wants you to do. So you might have this habit of worrying. And if you can acknowledge, like, oh, I'm stuck in that worry loop, now you have the possibility, okay, well, let me try and connect that to action. Let me do something more intentional. What usually happens, though, is we practice a little bit of mindfulness, and then we're like, but why was I worrying in the first place? I should have been practicing mindfulness. I'm such an idiot. I know. I'm so, like, because then we automatically trigger this habit of self-criticism. When you pay attention to something, you try and direct your attention to the present moment, you will inevitably get distracted, because that's how the human brain works. And you will get distracted by thoughts and these unhelpful habits you have programmed into your brain. And your goal is not what most people think. Your goal is not to clear your mind of all thoughts. Your goal is not to never get distracted. It's inevitable that you will get distracted at some point. So stop focusing on what you can't do. Your goal is, when you get distracted, to just practice, noticing it as fast as possible. If you label the emotion that you're experiencing, you're like, oh, I'm really stressed right now. I'm really frustrated. I'm really angry. I'm scared, whatever it is. That activates the analytical prefrontal cortex in a way that reduces the amygdala's automatic emotional reactivity. So if you can just be like, oh, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, that is an emotion that you are having right now, but now you are just aware of it as an emotion. And so instead of that emotion triggering your habits and it being in control of your life, you now have the opportunity to take the steering wheel and to go in the direction you want, or to act more intentionally. You'll probably make a mistake somewhere, and the emotions will start to take over again. But then you're like, oh no, now I'm angry that I'm frustrated, or I'm worried about getting anxious, or like, because we can have the emotions about emotions and emotions about thoughts, and just directing my attention to the things that are happening right now is an extremely powerful tool. And that tool is called mindfulness. And the more that we practice it, the more we can train it as a habit in the habit circuits of our brain. And it starts to make our these things like worries stop bothering us or interrupting us as much. Like, the tool of autopilot on airplanes is really helpful. Like, because you just program in their destination, it just takes you there automatically without you having to even think about it. But if, like, the destination changes, don't get mad at the fact that there is an autopilot. Just like, oh, well, I'm going to take control of the wheel now, or the whatever, the little joystick, whatever they have in the airplane, and redirect where I'm trying to go. And so mindfulness helps you act intentionally. It is not in and of itself about action. It's just about redirecting your attention. But it helps you break out of that autopilot cycle, because if you don't, and you're just on autopilot all the time, letting your emotions and habits run the show, then you're just a passenger. And if that is creating the life that you want, then awesome. you don't need to change anything. You have the environment and the habits and emotions perfectly programmed in balance. And there's some times in our life where it all just works out and that's perfect and we should be grateful for that. But sometimes we just need to change something about the environment or how our brain responds to that environment. And that is where mindfulness is so crucial. It allows us to realize, like, oh, I have the opportunity to act intentionally and go in a different direction. My brain's pulling me over here. I'm like, oh, no, thank you. I'm going to practice directing my attention in a different direction.
Hmm. And this sometimes means directing your attention to your emotions instead of whatever tasks you're doing to distract yourself, right?
Yeah, because it's really about the fact that your emotions are something that is happening right now. And you ignoring those emotions doesn't make them go away. That is one of the reasons why people do not practice mindfulness, because they think that their goal is to just like clear their mind of all thoughts and just be happy and bliss all the time. And if they pause for a moment, they're like, oh, all these negative thoughts come in and they feel like these negative emotions are, catching up to them that they've been trying to avoid. But what it actually is once you become aware of those thoughts and emotions as thoughts and emotions, then you stop giving all of your power to them. Because when you are ignoring them, that does not mean they're gone. It means they're just controlling the strings of the autopilot.
There are times when your emotions are in charge, and we should probably let that be, right?
Yeah. No, that's like, and that's a perfect segue to the this last piece that I wanted to talk about, which is allowing for experiencing your feelings. Because oftentimes there's nothing to do with emotions other than to feel them. And it is usually our attempts to not feel our emotions that create more stress and anxiety, because I have this emotion and I'm like, but I don't want to have this emotion. So then we try and change how we feel, and you don't always have immediate control over that. So we're automatically focused on something that we can't control, which increases stress and anxiety. And that doesn't make the emotion go away, but it does often create other problems. But if those are other problems that we like having more, like, oh, but I'd rather worry and waste all this time worrying, or I'd rather like get angry and then do this other stuff, like, great, your brain's perfectly happy for you to, ignore these emotions, and, they'll just be working in the background. And there's no reason why you can't do that. But if you, or as many of my clients are like, but I'm not happy with this, I'm not satisfied with this. Okay, well, then you don't have to change. You want to change because you're not satisfied with with the choices that your brain has made for you. Essentially, like, if you don't acknowledge and allow some level of experiencing your feelings, then your brain's going to find the quickest, fastest, easiest way it knows to deal with those feelings. Regions like the impulse circuit in your brain, like, oh, well, just have a beer. And you're like, oh, let me have a beer. Oh, now I'm not stressed about it as much. And so then the next time you're feeling stressed about it, your brain's like, oh, well, that last time just drinking a beer made you feel better. So great, now we can drink a beer. And then after a couple months, you're like, like, I feel like I'm drinking too much and I want to stop drinking. But then if you stop drinking, then you feel all these negative emotions. And like, you don't have to change. But if you realize, like, oh, my brain tried to figure out the fastest way to solve this problem and it successfully did it, but it created other problems. The amazing thing is that sometimes when you just allow yourself to experience those emotions, then they go away and they stop being a problem. And so if you don't allow yourself to experience those negative emotions, it often sucks away the meaningfulness and connection that are so important to us. Your emotions are never invalid. They might not be accurate. Like there might be other information that comes to light that means like, oh, like then you don't feel that emotion anymore. But like oftentimes this is where the logical part of our brain and the emotional part of our brain get us into trouble because we have an emotion and they're like, no, but that doesn't make sense. I'm gonna ignore it. Then like it's like when you're starting a new business or meeting someone, like, oh, you're excited about this opportunity, and oh, you got this little doubt coming up, and so we're like, oh, I'm gonna ignore that, like, because I can't allow for any doubt that's gonna destroy my confidence or whatever. But like sometimes, if like the only thing to do that's helpful with the doubt is to acknowledge, like, oh yeah, I'm worried that this won't work out because it's important to me. Okay, well, even though it won't work out, I'm still going to do it. Great. Emotion felt and dealt with and solved. And like instead, if there's like a little doubt there and your only solution to it is to try and suppress it and ignore it, well, then it'll just increase over time because your brain is like, hey, buddy, like you might fail. And it's until you acknowledge the message that like you are scared of failure, then your brain's going to distract you with that failure instead of being like, oh yeah, it's really important for me to not fail. So what are the things I have control over? I'm going to do that, but we don't have full control over everything that's important to us. So there will always be some residual emotion that there's nothing to do with other than feel. But when people get overwhelmed by their emotions, there are a lot of things that they can do. Sometimes it's a matter of like taking control over other parts of your life, like making sure you're exercising or sleeping well. And if you just do these general maintenance parts of your life, oh, that turns the volume down in your emotions a little bit so that when you feel them, they're not quite so overwhelming. Or thinking that you have to feel them by yourself, like share them with a friend or a loved one, someone you trust. I think a lot of times people think there's this binary option of like either I need to just be action oriented and ignore those negative emotions, just keep going, 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 going. Or if I allow even just a little bit of doubt or negative emotion to seep in, well, then it's just going to totally overwhelm me and crush me. And if you just allow yourself small moments of being able to feel those emotions, either through talking about them or writing about them or just consuming art, for example, like watching a movie or reading a book can help us get in touch with those emotions, or listening to music. Sometimes music is a really powerful way because it helps us feel the emotions that our brains are trying to express. And then once we feel them, then they just aren't a problem anymore. Then the thing that most smart, successful people usually try last is to experience their emotions like, maybe I just need to feel sad for a moment that my, business didn't work out. Or maybe I just need to allow, myself to feel frustrated and angry that like, my clients are treating me this way or whatever. Like, great. Sometimes we just need to allow for those emotions. And that helps us harness the power of these deeper brain circuits, the emotional and the habit circuit, instead of having them constantly be fighting against us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking such great questions. It's always wonderful to talk with you. And yeah, hope you found that helpful and hope everyone listening found that helpful as well.